Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pixelists podcast, the podcast about all the nerdy things we love. About all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. There we go.
You got it.
And you know what? Beyond Critical Role, because today we're not talking about that. Today
Nope.
we're actually talking about something different.
Get that nerd D&D stuff. Sorry, I just jumped in again. You know, I get so excited. Take the nerd D&D stuff. Get it out of here. We're going to some other nerd stuff over here.
That's right.
Some of you guys have joked about this being a Critical Role channel. It is no longer. We're getting back to our roots of a wide expanse of nerdy stuff. Still no games. We don't do games, so don't ask us about that.
Oh my gosh. I just remembered something that maybe it's not the time to talk about it right now, but talking about the memes of the Pixelist channel, it's like games, and then I was like The Witcher 2, and then I just got devastated all over again.
Yeah. Henry Cavill leaving the Witcher series after season 3. The show seems doomed, right? I mean,
of course, like I'm not even going to watch it. I don't think it's season 4. And it makes me think season 3 is probably more of a continuation in the things that went wrong in season 2. I would imagine. And that's probably one of the reasons he stepped away.
We probably need like a separate, we need a separate video on this probably. But there was something so sweet about Henry Cavill being casted as Geralt and him being a diehard Witcher fan himself. Like, I don't know, there's just something that makes the show all more enjoyable and then also forgiving when it has like terrible writing.
Yeah. But yeah, another topic for another time. That just came to me right there when it was just a series of sad emotions. But anyway, today we're talking about Rings of Power, the Amazon Lord of the Rings show. And this is a little bit different than our normal content. Blake and I both have seen the entire show already. So we're going to kind of give our thoughts, our critiques, and maybe, a generalized, should you watch this show? Is this worth your time type of thing?
Yeah. I think we're going to put like our stamp of either approval or our stamp of disapproval.
We got 2 stamps.
There's 2 stamps. Yeah. So ultimately, we want to talk about, is this a good show or not? They spent $1 billion on this show.
Yep.
Which, brother, I can't think of a show that spent this much money. I mean, how much was Game of Thrones?
Game of Thrones was a lot, but I do remember like this set the record. This is like literally the most expensive show of all time.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's dive into the discussion. And if you're new to the channel, you can check out our other video content. We talk about all sorts of different shows, movies, things like that. A lot of Marvel, a lot of Critical Role, D&D kind of stuff. And, we're just going to talk about what we think about it. And we'd love to know what you think about it. So let us know in the comments your spicy take or non-spicy take. So how do you want to do this?
That's a good question.
We purposely have not talked about this together,
right? To
keep it authentic for fresh, the podcast.
Yeah. We're all running by the seat of our pants right now.
Maybe
go ahead.
Well, I'll say maybe like an extremely rough recap, like sub 2 minutes. Like this is kind of generically what happened in the show for season 1.
All right, yeah. So basically, the Rings of Power.
30 minutes later. and then the subtext of this scene is actually...
I'll do my best here. So the Rings of Power is essentially a prequel series to what we're familiar with from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, based on J.R.R. Tolkien's, not only Lord of the Rings, but all of the prolific stuff he wrote about this world in the Silmarillion, and I'm sure there's other things. And a quick disclaimer, I guess, is that I don't want to speak for Blake, but I am not like a Lord of the Rings buff. Like, for those of you coming from our Critical Role content, I like to think I know what I'm talking about there. Here, no. Like, I'm probably missing connections, going to say the wrong thing.
And I think it actually, something worth saying, we should have said that at the start, and we didn't talk about this, Will, but so correct me if you disagree. Maybe just like a blanket, no book spoilers in the comment section. Because we will have people who probably check out this video. I know personally I've tried to avoid book spoilers only because the little that I read spoiled some pretty interesting stuff for me in season 1. So I would just say in general, for those of you who are more well read, just be cognizant of book spoilers, similar to what we had with Game of Thrones, which I know it's the book spoilers are a little bit different in that it's not like here's then what happened and then this is what happened, but more kind of theories. Hey, it could be this. Here's a little detail. I'd say keep the book spoilers just out as best we can.
Yeah, or
Agree,
at the
disagree,
very least,
or
just hit us with a big capitalized spoilers, asterisks,
right?
and then if you want to make the comment, you could do it then. But just definitely at least tag it, please.
Yeah. Having said that, I haven't read anything, so I'm definitely not.
Yeah, so neither
You
of us
guys
are
have come
experts.
to the channel where we're going to tell you if this is a good show, but we know nothing about Lord of the Rings. So
Yeah, it's a important perspective.
yeah,
But so anyway, this series, The Rings of Power, is a prequel to The Lord of the Rings based on Tolkien's lore, if you will, and it covers the events during Middle Earth's Second Age, which is when all of these rings, the Ring of Power that we're familiar with from Lord of the Rings, when all of these were forged. Um, so it's about basically the rise of Lord Sauron. Um, so I know these events take place in the lore over like thousands and thousands of years. So I think for the purposes of this show, it's kind of going to be its own canon in a way. Like they're going to take some creative liberties here and there. So it's not going to be, parse for parse the exact same. But that is the era. That is the story that this show is ultimately tell across however many seasons. I imagine it's at least more than one with how much money they've already pumped into this. But quick recap: the main character, there's several, but I would say is Galadriel,
right.
and you're not going to give her a whole backstory. If you're on this video, you probably at least know who that is. And it's following her story after this great war between Morgoth and the forces of good, if you will. They've defeated Morgoth, and now people are trying to get back to normal. But Galadriel's brother was killed by Sauron during this war, and she's basically still out for revenge. She's not over it.
Right.
She's not ready to move on. She still thinks he's out there. She thinks the forces of Morgoth are not fully defeated, and this is her obsession. And so the story follows her following that obsession, coming into contact quickly with a man named Halbrand. They kind of join forces throughout this first season. Skipping spoilers for now, we also follow the story of these human kingdoms, this human kingdom in the Southlands. Well, not kingdom, these people in the
Yeah.
Southlands, who are being guarded by elves because they, back in the day, fought on Morgoth's side. So they've still been kind of watched over by these elves. So we follow the story of this settlement and also the elf that is kind of guarding them. Um, and they kind of discover that orcs are still around and they're trying to deal with that. And we also have this storyline of the humans of Numenor, which are this like secluded band of humans from back in the day.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Galadriel and Halbrand convinced to come enter the
The Southlands.
Southland skirmish, and
Right.
some stuff ensues. Lots of things happen clearly, and I guess I don't want to get into too many like spoilers in this quick recap, but
Yeah. Okay.
this is all set up, right? And um, that's the gist of it. I don't know. That was probably terrible, but
Yeah, no, you get some main story points. I mean, I'm gonna ding you because you missed the best story point,
I know
which was Elrond
the
and
bromance.
yeah,
Yeah,
with Durham the third, I guess, Durham the fourth.
yeah. I think it's the third because I think his dad is the second.
Yeah. So the Dwarven Kingdom, there's a really great relationship there as well. So, and their discovery of Mithril and how Elrond really believes that, or rather, um, uh, Gilgalad, is that right? The
The
king of the elves.
I think so. I'm gonna butcher all these names,
Yeah,
but
sorry guys.
yeah.
If you're like diehard, just go ahead and forgive us. So, but anyway, they want the mithril, and there's like a whole storyline there. But maybe a good starting point. What did you think of the show?
Okay. Let me just walk you through a quick journey.
Oh, okay. You thought this through.
A quick journey. So, even though just self-proclaimed not an expert on any of this, um, I haven't read the books, but the Lord of the Rings trilogy, uh, the first
Peter
one, the
Jackson.
main one,
Yeah.
yeah. One of my favorite series of movies of all time. Like I love those movies.
Yeah.
I've seen them more times than I can count. Of course, the special extended versions. Um,
Yes.
so while I'm not like, a diehard fan, I don't think it's fair to say. I am a diehard like fan of those movies. Um, so hearing about this show, I was excited. I tried to temper my expectations because we've been hurt a lot in the past, but I came into the show hoping it was good and excited for it. So with the first two episodes, because it dropped two as like the
Right.
premiere, I know
Right.
a lot of people were kind of on the fence about it. I liked them. I was like, I love it so far. This is great. Um,
Yeah. I felt the same way. I watched the first two and I thought, okay, this is. I really like the intro episode. I like the second episode a lot, and yeah, I felt similar that I was like, okay, I feel good about this. But I also watched the first two episodes. I think maybe it was like around episode 4 in terms of timeline, so it had been a couple of weeks.
Hmm.
So a lot of like the back and forth had already passed. So I feel like I got to watch the first two episodes in kind of a more insulated from criticism kind
yeah,
of way, if that makes sense.
yeah, it does. And so again, I heard some people weren't a big fan of the first two. Not the case for me. I really liked it. We can talk more about like the specifics of what I like and dislike in the show, but it started off good. And in the middle of the season, um, I don't know. It just kind of
Bro,
it was a bit mediocre. I don't.
bro. If we
This
have to spend any more time in Numenor, I'm going to lose it. That's what I felt in the middle. Was middle's maybe a little bit too. It was episodes 3, 4, and 5. It was like the only thing worse than Numenor was when they all decided to leave Numenor, and then the whole next episode they were still in Numenor. Like that was like my permanent hell. Was we can't get out of Numenor. Numenor was definitely the lowest part of the show. I would say even the worst part of the show. And someone who ended watching it at episode 5 would have a totally different experience than someone who watched episode 5 through 8. Or was there 8 or was there 10? There was 8.
I think there were 8.
Yeah. I think someone who watched 5 through 8 had a totally different experience, or rather 6, 7, 8 would have had a totally different experience than those 3 episodes.
Yeah, and like I said, I know a lot of people didn't like the first two, so I can imagine a lot of people maybe were out. Just they didn't even finish. They started the show and they're like, I'm not about this. But so yeah, for me, like the first two, the middle kind of lost me a bit, and I was like, man. And this example might not resonate with some of you if you don't know what I'm talking about, but it felt like a CW show to me.
It did.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about when I say that.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I don't know it, which is like the last thing you want to evoke when you are literally the highest budgeted show of all time. So I kind of was starting to be like, man, I guess maybe some of the criticisms people were talking about, I kind of seeing them now. But then to the show's credit, in the finale especially, but like the last two episodes, I'll kind of cram together for this, is it kind of got me back a little bit. I really enjoyed the finale, and I could see it more as a setup for this story. Like season one was kind of a setup that needed to happen, and this might just be blind like naive optimism. But I think season two is going to be a lot better, or at least could be a lot better. So
Yeah,
it
we
kind
call
of
that we
I
call that
went real
coping.
down and then got a little bit of hope at the end of the show.
Yeah. I bet you think Witcher season 3 is going to be good too.
I wanted it to be, but now I don't think it's going to be that great.
No, I mean I'm with you. I mean, it definitely feels like there was a point the show turned in quality that makes me hopeful for season 2. Like it almost kind of felt like you could see the writers kind of seeing what stuck, and then around that mid-season they kind of found their rhythm. Or maybe it's just you see like the weakness of the writing room just played out, and that these sort of like city politics, kind of this intrigue back and forth, I would say is not a strength of the writing team.
No.
Literally every minute like every time the scenes cut from like Elrond over back to Numenor, I was like, no, go back, take me back. I don't want to see any more of this. And I've been trying to put my finger on like what was so bad about Numenor. and I'm not sure what it is. I think about that comment. It had kind of like a CW vibe to it. I feel like I never noticed things like set design or costumes or things like that. But there was a point, like maybe around the second or third episode, where I was like, okay, they've been here for 2 weeks and they have the same outfits on. Like they've been wearing Galadriel's been wearing this green dress for 2 weeks, and this is $1 billion show. And it got me thinking about Game of Thrones, about how like every scene the characters seemed so alive, if that makes sense. Like they had different outfits on, like every room felt like a living, like things had been carefully placed, except for season 8 Starbucks cup. It just felt like there was a lot of intentionality there. And with Numenor, I just kind of found myself thinking, I don't know, there was some weirdness stuff to it too, like the part where who's the senator, Farazan,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm not gonna be good with names, but I know who you're talking about. The guy with
Beard
the
Dad is what I'm yeah. Where he like does the speech and then all the people come out with like wine glasses. I was like, what is going, like, were these people just waiting in an alley? Like, which I get like, I feel like the writers hit like the detail of like I get where they were coming from. Like he's a motivator, he's a political pacifier, and he's able to like pull strings, and he knows how to satisfy people. Let's bring out the booze. But the way this stuff was executed, I was just like, bro, what is going on here?
Yeah, it was just sloppy. It was they you're supposed to show not tell,
right?
In terms of like interesting characterization and stuff like that. And I felt like there was a lot of tell, not show, for if I can put that whole little comment in a box. But yeah, I agree with you. It just, and what's crazy is there's like a stark contrast between like the absolutely gorgeous set dressings of like the New Zealand landscapes, and like part of it was like breathtaking, and I was like, this is beautiful, like this looks movie quality. And then we have like this looks like it's in a CW show, like specifically the Isildur and his like two boat friends, like all like the scenes where they're just in their simple robes and like in the random alleyway of Numenor. I was like, I feel like they made this for $10, like outside in the alleyway behind the studio type of thing. So it was kind of jarring to like have those two situations.
And it just wasn't like, some stuff just like it like didn't land. Like you think about Isildur and his two boat friends losing their position
now.
yeah they lost, they get thrown off like the whatever. I can't think what it is. I think it was like a sea guard or whatever. But the whole scene was weird. Like I liked, and here's what's so frustrating about Numenor is there were like slight touches of, okay, that could be really cool. Like the fact that he's hearing his name, and is his mother's name? Like, what is that? Like, as he sees like the edge of Middle Earth, it's like, what's happening? Like, that's really cool. And like the queen, bro, we got to like look up these names, by the way, before,
before we Muriel, I think, is at least her name.
Yeah. I think it was Muriel, right? Or was it Mariel? We better stop. Wait, let's keep going. So the queen, she's having the dream of Numenor being destroyed by these crashing waves. Like those are really interesting story points. But then beyond there, it's almost felt like when you have an idea for something and you don't want to do it yourself, and so you call someone and you pay them, like you said, $10, and then you like verbally tell them like, okay, then you're going to do this, and then make sure it has this in it, and then what they give you, it's like, it's just garbage. Like specifically, I'm thinking about when they get thrown off, you have Isildur being kind of like he's dazing out, and the rope slips from his hand, and then the captain of the ship immediately says, like, what happened? What's going on? And he's going to throw off like a couple of them or whatever. And then Isildur's like, no, it was me. And he's like, I've seen you, tie that knot 1,000 times. That was intentional. And I was like, wait, how did you go from what happened to I was watching you as you were holding? It just was weird. It was almost like they didn't have a reason to have him get thrown off. So they had to let's just say he saw it. Let's have him say he saw it. They're thrown off. It's over. I don't know, man. Like stuff like that, just like when it skips steps, I'm kind of
Yeah,
just like, wait, what?
yeah, just lazy writing. They could have done it so much better. And yeah, I think it's just the snowball effect of lots of those little things, especially throughout the middle episodes, that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So, I mean, for again, the highest budgeted show of all time, you would hope that it could be a little bit better, but I mean, I guess all the money in the world doesn't buy you good writing. Um,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I don't know.
I think also there just wasn't a strong character to like lead those scenes. Like you
Yeah.
think about um oh my gosh, dude. Tyrion Lannister in anytime he's like kind of navigating the politics as
Mm.
the hand of the king, like that actor just
Peter Dinklage.
carries every Peter Dinklage carries every scene. The horrific, awful son, for the purple wedding or whatever,
Yeah.
carries his scenes. Tywin Lannister carries his scenes, and it just felt like we had a lot of just very milk toast characters. Like no one, but there was the opportunity there. I actually, despite a lot of criticism, I really like Galadriel, and I really like what's the dad's name?
Yeah. Elendil.
Yes,
I like him
Elendil.
a lot too.
Loved Elendil. I
Yeah.
thought he was awesome. But I just didn't really feel like anyone was really doing anything interesting, honestly.
Yeah. So, question for you there: how much of that do you think, or how much would you put on the actors for that, and how much would you put on the writing? Like, do you think some of it was just like you wish there were some better actors, like a la Peter Dinklage, or do you think they just really didn't have stuff to chew on?
I don't think it's a strong point for the writers. Like Galadriel, I don't think she's a bad actress. I actually really enjoy her scenes. Um, I think that you can see the disconnects in how she acts from scene to scene, and how some scenes seem to contradict one another. Like you have one scene where she's basically being impulsive, a terrible negotiator, kind of like I just want to get my way, the whole there's a tempest in me, that whole thing. And then later you have her like giving advice to Isildur and to the son, the Southlander boy, like
Yeah.
coaching and giving advice. And it's like, I'm like, are you really the world's biggest hypocrite? Or are we really just seeing like two entirely different portrayals of this character? All that to say, I like the actors and actresses. I think that they have a lot of talent. I think the writing's really bad.
Yeah. That's
What
that's
about
basically
you?
where I am as well. Um, and for some of them, I just don't think they've had anything, like they haven't had anything to show one way or the other, like their acting chops for most of the characters. But yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards the writing is just weak. But and you already mentioned this a second ago, but just want to put it down for myself as well. The highlight of the show to me was definitely Elrond and Durin's romance and scenes together. Um, so I don't know if I think that's mostly credit to them, um,
Hmm?
more so than the writing on those scenes. The potential's there, and hopefully they can kind of steer more in that direction. But yeah, that was great. And uh, the Halbrand actor. This is random, but I kept seeing Jaskier when I saw him from The
Hmm.
Witcher, and so I kept
Yeah.
like picturing him. Um, okay, I kind of, not that we've been avoiding spoilers, but there is
Hang
one
on, I
thing
gotta
I
I
want
gotta
to.
complain more about Numenor. That you just
Yeah,
reminded me
yeah. Go
about
ahead.
Halbrand. Sorry. The other thing that drives me crazy is I did not like Halbrand in Numenor. I liked him everywhere outside of it. In Numenor, he was the most cliche, I'm smarter than everyone. Like think about the scene where Elendil and when Galadriel sees the queen and Elendil has her dagger or something, and then Halbrand walks up to him and like he's like, "Hey, thanks for saving us," and like pats him on the back. And it's like, okay, he just took the dagger. Like I just think about like the mechanics of you're in a room full of people like on the royal floor, and then like later like stealing like the craftsman badge off of the guy, and I don't know. I was thinking. I felt like they were trying really hard to make him a Sawyer from Lost, but that he just wasn't. He just wasn't. It was like Sawyer discount, like Sawyer light, and I was honestly annoyed. I was like, I am so tired of like this clichéness. Like, I'm gonna get a little emotional about it, but that's all I have to say about how Brandon Numenor was. As once we were gone, he was back on my good list.
Well, I want to respond to that, but quickly, if anyone's on this video and like you haven't seen the show yet, I'm about to jump into some spoilers that you probably don't want to know. So there's a warning. But so I get what you're saying with Halbrand, and I
Bro, if
kind of
you're
felt
about
that.
to discount my criticism by saying because
I
of
just
who
saying
I'm just gonna.
I felt the same way
All
too,
right.
but given the reveal at the end, I at least thought it made it make more sense and shut.
No,
You're
it
not, you don't think
doesn't.
so?
No, I think it is the biggest cop out. Which, okay, we said spoilers, everybody. If you're watching this YouTube video, you need to stop and finish the show. I just this whole like, well, he's Sauron, so that's why that he's able to deceive a whole room of people. I'm like, give me a break, bro. This is so stupid.
Well, he's skilled and a
Oh
master of deception and
no.
lies, and I
I I thought that reveal worked for the scene where they get to the Elven city and he's bedridden, and then the very next scene he's up talking to Celebrimbor. Like that I thought was a good tie-in to, like, that was when I turned to my wife and I said, it's because he's Sauron. That's why he's up and about. Because she was like, wait, how did he just go from like on a horse about to die to this? Everything else, no, I don't give it. It's too far-fetched for me.
okay. I mean that's a fair criticism. I think it at least makes more sense than it would if that wasn't the case. I think
Sure.
if that wasn't the case, it'd be like, okay, like we get it, he's cool. Like what a badass.
Right.
But so okay, again, like don't know anything about the deep lore. So starting this show, I had no idea that was coming. That Halbrand would end up being Sauron. I kind of
Right.
started to have suspicions before the final reveal, but I still wasn't sure. So I'm sure a lot of fans probably knew the moment he appeared on screen, like, oh, that's really Sauron. Maybe they didn't. I don't know, but it was a reveal to me throughout the course of the show. So I definitely liked it in the sense of, okay, I like this as an explanation for a lot of things I've been kind of like, well, about. One of which I don't know if this is a fair criticism or not, but when we first were with him and Gladriel, like getting to know each other, and he's got the symbol or whatever that denotes him as the long lost heir of this kingdom or whatever. I was like, man, so he's exactly the same as Aragorn, basically. And I know this lore has been like long written, and it wouldn't be something that like Amazon just made up. But I was like, oh, this is just kind of like we're retreading the exact same ground here. Like this is not interesting. So I really liked that was like he just stole that from a dead guy type of thing.
No, I thought, yeah. I mean, before I was on the he's Sauron boat, yeah, where my mind went, I remember turning to my wife. He tells Galadriel, like, I sold off a dead man, and you think he's like kind of feigning, like, what, that? And I remember turning to my wife and being like, it would be interesting if it turns out he's actually being honest and he really did steal it and he's really a nobody.
Yeah.
And this was a little bit after he had been kind of like, shored up to be like the true king of the Southlanders or what have you, which is a lot of cool, like, Morgoth having ruled the Southlands, now Sauron taking over the Southlands as we know to be Mordor. There was kind of like a cool parallel there of like actually being the king of the Southlands.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I agree with you. I like that whole thing. It was pretty interesting. I lost my train of thought.
But yeah, I would say that the Durin and Elrond bromance was one of my favorite parts. But then the corny stuff aside, I really liked the character arc of Halbrand. Like I feel like that was, especially in the finale with kind of everything coming together and him and Gladriel's scenes together, that was one of the stronger points of the finale for me. So I really liked that. And I think there's potential there if they don't, they don't skew CW and they skew more HBO with how they're going to take things. but yeah, I just liked how, looking back at some of those scenes, like the one where he's talking about, I stole this off a dead man, when she's like convincing him, like, hey, it doesn't matter what you did in the past, you can make a difference now. And I think it's interesting to think, like, was Sauron really considering like this redemptive path in that moment, when she was trying to convince him that he's not beyond saving. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you think he was truthfully considering like a turn to righteousness, for lack of a better word, or was he always kind of double double what's the word I'm looking here for? But
Yeah. Is he manipulating, or is he
yeah,
being?
yeah.
Is
Was it
there a shred of
always that type of thing?
genuineness? I think it's a more interesting character if it's the latter, and it's kind of where I've gone in my head canon is, you see with Adar like the hurt and anger on Halbrand's face when he um is talking to Adar, and which Adar, by the way, total high point, such a great character.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
Uncle
same.
Benjen. Sorry that I don't know your actor name, but love that whole line of like, "Did I hurt someone you loved?" Like, it was so great.
Hmm.
But so it does feel like there is some authenticity, some genuineness there. I don't think Sauron, though, in his mind is like, I'm going to, like, he's conflicted in terms of like, should I be good or should I not be good? I think that it is part manipulative in that he's playing Galadriel in the sense of like, well, what if what I did is really, really bad? And Galadriel's like, it can be forgiven. It's okay. And he's like, but it's real bad, kind of like messing with her a little bit. But on the same token, I think there is like a level of him feeling righteous about his 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 route, like what he wants to do with Middle Earth. And like, what's the line he uses in the finale? Like bind the light to me or something. Like, I think he sees all these things as like a means for more power, more authority, controlling Middle Earth, whatever that would be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we know where it's ultimately headed, and that he does, kind of go over the deep end of being the evil guy. Uh, but yeah, my headcanon is not the right word, but my hope is that my personal storyline that I think would make it better is that he was earnest in his consideration of like doing the right thing. And I
Hmm.
like to think that like that moment earlier that we were talking about in the when they were in the cells together, leading up to the moment in the finale where he is like proposing to her, for lack of a better word, like, I'm the darkness, but you will be the light by my side to like keep me in check, essentially. But I still feel like he may like have the wrong, like he definitely has not the best intentions necessarily, but I feel like he at least was open to like, but you're going to be the one to rein that in. Like, we will rule together and we will be ruling everyone. But like, he was still trying to do it in like a not necessarily like the evilest way possible. Like, so there was like this glimmer of like, no, together it'll work type of thing. But now
Yeah.
obviously, she didn't go for that, and so now he's kind of gone off the deep. But I like to think that there was that, like, at least for moments during the show, he was considering like turning to the good side, for a really cliche way to put it.
Well, and it does make you wonder the kind of the abrasiveness in Galadriel's negotiations with Queen Muriel. How much of that was just perceived as bad writing, and how much of it was Halbrand manipulating her? Like, we see it a
Yeah.
bit more overt where he's like, hey, try it a different way. But I think there is like a subtleness there that maybe he's relishing in his prison cell, knowing that Galadriel's out there, hopefully convincing Numenor to head to the Southlands, or because if Adar is an enemy of his, maybe he does want the Numenorians to head to the Southlands and be, maybe even be wiped out. I don't know, but the kind of the subtleness I'm referring to is what you see in the finale, where Celebrimbor is describing the potential for the ring, and he says, um, "Not something of flesh, but over flesh or above flesh."
Mhm.
And Galadriel's like, have you been talking to Halbrand? That seems pretty evil.
Yeah, like wait, what?
But it was a cool, like, subtle detail. Like, if she hadn't even said that, you may not even catch it, that he's saying something that isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the rings in the final shot, Elrond, Galadriel, and Celebrimbor. Elrond is totally loses interest in revealing what he's found in terms of the lineage of the Southlanders. And I think they're not just in awe of the rings. I think knowing the influence of Sauron, that is a subtle nod to the corrupting influence of him already on them.
I like that. I like that a lot because I was wondering why, because both Galadriel and Elrond don't bring it up because they both know, like she hides it from both of them, and then Elrond obviously finds out at the end, and he also kind of keeps it close to his chest. So I like that maybe that's already the influence kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Through.
Because I was just trying to make sense of like why would they not just say it, But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe the rings are just that beautiful. I don't know.
Yeah, and I didn't, again, not to sound like a broken record, but not knowing all this lore, I thought it was really interesting that this was, and maybe this is, for all I know, this is something they changed from the source material, but that those three were made first and all of the rings weren't created at the same time, because that's what I had always thought. But I never really thought too much about it, and it definitely makes sense that, like, well, all the rings were created together, but one was forged in secret that no one knew about. It's not like Sauron and like all the elves and dwarves and humans were all like in a forge together, and he was like off in the doing one.
Right.
So I like this that it I like the setup of it at least, and so I'm really interested to see how do the humans and the dwarves get involved in this. Like, when does Elrond and them, do they travel to the other races and like share this knowledge with them, or do the other ones find out and are like, we gotta make some of this too?
Well,
Those are
it
interesting
is.
things. I'm excited to find out.
And I think what's interesting too is we have the gift of hindsight. Like, we know the rings are bad, except for one of the elven rings that's made in secret, the third one. We know the rings are bad. And so I think if you're not cognizant of hindsight, you could be like, I don't know, it could kind of feel like a trope or something, or a little cliche, like, we love the rings. Like, how could you be this stupid? And it's like similar to like Halbrand, like you mentioned in Numenor. Like, if they didn't know to suspect anything, you probably wouldn't, right? Going back to your comment though, I think what's generally known in the lore is that the rings are gifted in some way. Not necessarily like as a direct gift, but they come about as like these artifacts of incredible power and ability, which we saw for the Elven Kingdom. It was literally like a boon to save their kingdom. I'm assuming in the next season, which I don't know how fast we're going to see these things rolled out, we're going to see these, similar storylines where these things are really a great thing, but we as the audience know what's, what's really, it's kind of a bummer because like we know the twist, we have like the gift of hindsight. So I don't know.
Yeah. And I did like that, because again, I didn't know this. I didn't know that they were originally crafted because they were like losing their immortality. So I thought that was a cool, like, oh, it wasn't just a pure power grab of like, let's create these powerful rings. It was out of like, we're gonna die if we don't. Which I don't really understand how three elves having rings would then protect like the entire race as a whole. But
Bro,
magic.
here's the deal. No, yeah, this is another like plot hole. Is like my wife was just like, so this little tiny rock's gonna save them all? Like, there's definitely like something that doesn't make sense there. And they had an opportunity to work it out a little bit when Durin is like holding it up and he's like, so this is gonna save your people, and everyone's like, yep. Like, it almost felt like there was a chance to be like, or at least, even if you're a writer and you don't want to like try to in a convoluted way write it all out, you could at least say, have Durin be like, say what the audience is thinking. Well, I don't see how that's possible, something so small.
Yeah.
And then maybe Elrond says, it is the smallest things that, whatever elf thing that he would say, and we're like, okay, yeah, that sounded good, but
Yeah.
it was just never talked about. And so I think, like you said, it ends up being kind of this weird, like, okay, so what's going on with this thing? I don't know.
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure if that was the implication that these three rings were going to save the elves as a whole, or like maybe it just saves them and those in close proximity to them. Maybe these are answers we get further explanation on, or maybe it's magic, which it to some level is fine because we're in a fantasy world. But I don't know. I feel like there definitely needed to be some bit more of an explanation, at least, you know, for my tastes.
Right. Right. It does make you wonder, where do we go from here? How do the dwarves, like, I wonder, is Durin going to overthrow his father and they open the mines up and, Celebrimbor's like, hey, I can show you some cool rings you can make with that. I don't know. Um, it's something interesting. We're eventually going to see the Nazgul, like not literally,
Yeah,
but the kings of the human kingdoms who become the Nazgul, including the Witch King, maybe?
he was the leader, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if and again, I don't know the timeline, and obviously the timeline is going to get a bit condensed for the purposes of the show. But I was wondering if the kid might be one, the one that stabs himself with that sword. I feel like
Oh,
he's
that's
got
interesting.
kind of like a turn to the dark side arc in him, maybe. Um, yeah, so curious if if anyone, I guess, would I want to know?
So
Maybe I would. Maybe let me know with the spoiler tag in the comments if
do you think we're going to get like a time jump?
I think we almost if like I don't know what the purview of the show is even trying to accomplish. Honestly, like I don't know if the final episode of the final season is going to be like a lead up to what we know from the Lord of the Rings, or maybe it ends with Sauron coming to power for the first time. Maybe it ends with him getting defeated. I don't know. So I don't really. If it ends with him getting, I don't know. Either way, it seems like there's going to have to be a time jump. I feel like because we're
Yeah.
talking like thousands of years, but maybe not. Like maybe that's not the story they're trying to tell. Maybe they're just trying to tell a story over a 3-year span or something. Because I have no idea what to expect.
Do you think we see Halbrand again?
I think we see Halbrand again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like he's going to be one of the main
Really?
characters. I hope so, at least. I mean, what
Okay.
are you thinking? Maybe
Oh,
not.
I don't know. I mean, if Sauron's a shapeshifter, maybe there's
Oh,
another key character. It is Sauron, but it's a
okay.
different
So you're
actor.
saying we will see that character, but it might be a new actor?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Give me
Well,
Sean Bean is what I want. I want Boromir. Doesn't make sense that you're here. He's like, but I am.
I hope we see Sauron, the character, at least. Otherwise, I don't know. That I feel like that's one of the big draws of the show is like watching him come to power.
Yeah.
Um,
Which, I mean, it seems like there's going to be some kind of arc with him and Adar, either in next season or a future season. Like there's more to happen in Mordor. I feel like, other than
yeah.
now it's just Mordor.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Adar. So now that a nice little segue. Again, I wanted to say like you did. One of the highlights of the show for me, one of the characters I thought was actually like written well. Like he is this. And again, me not knowing who anybody was, I thought he was Sauron when he was first introduced. So when he was like, "Oh, that's not me," and I killed him. He even says, which I want to talk about that in a second. But I just love that he was one of the first elves that was turned into an orc. He considers himself an orc, I think, and his story I can empathize with. Like here's these outcast, ostracized, brutal, yes, but they're living things just like the other races, and they're just looking for their place in the world, and that's his motivation. So like I can not that I can get I mean I can get behind it, but not that I'm rooting for him, especially with the way they go about things in terms of just like murdering people. But I just think that's a good character, and so I'm glad that he, at least for now, is still around, and we're going to see more from him. But onto the killing Sauron part, I thought it was interesting that he thought that, and two, when Halbrand has like the spear at his throat, he's like, "Do you remember me?" So like there obviously was some sort of interaction between them,
right.
and I'm tying this into another storyline of, I don't know what these people are called, but the guys in white cloaks that were chasing after the Meteor Man. They were looking for Sauron,
Right.
and they were like, their presumption was that Sauron would not have his memories. That's why they were looking for them, so they could then help him get his memories back.
Right.
So, and we know that guy came from the stars. So did Adar kill Sauron and he too like returned to Middle Earth from the stars or from wherever, and so that's why he said that, like, because he literally did kill him, but now Sauron's come back? Or did Sauron never die? Or is the truth somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some kind of like, it wasn't really talked about in Lord of the Rings, like the spirit world, I guess. Like you have Frodo puts on the ring, and I think some of the content I've seen around it is that when he puts on the ring, it doesn't just make him invisible; it like physically like transports him into like the spiritual world, and that's why he sees like the Nazgul for who they really are. I don't know if that's how based in theory that is. So it does make me wonder, since those three ascetics or whatever you would call them, since they had kind of Nazgulian faces whenever the spear the staff gets raised up, it does make me wonder, is there going to be like a more like role to play in the spiritual world? And like you said, was Sauron killed and sent there and found a way back? I mean, I have no idea. Definitely with Adar's lines, I didn't know. It's tough because you don't know, what is he feigning ignorance or is he
Right.
being honest? So I'm not really sure, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. And I just thought it was interesting that to and kind of the Adar, and if Adar killed him aside, I just thought it was interesting that the again, what did you call them? Did they have a name? The cloaked.
I said ascetics, like
Uh,
like religious. I don't
yeah.
know.
So is there? They obviously like were maybe even tasked by Sauron at one point with this job if he knew that was going to happen to him, or maybe they're just ultra fanatics and they have these beliefs for some reason. But it's just interesting that like, oh, to Gandalf, I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second, I guess. But they said like, "Oh, you're the other one." So like as if there
Yeah,
was like
the
this
Ishtar.
prophesized return of two entities, um, which all that would make sense in my mind. But then, as far as Halbrand and Sauron were confirmed from what we saw, there was no indication that he was like newly returneth to this world, or at all not aware of it. Like he had all his faculties seemingly the whole time, unlike
Yeah,
the Meteor
all
Man.
all we know is that his first scene, he's on this raft with a few other people who've seen better days. We don't really know. We know they fled the Southlands because of the orcs. So who knows? I mean, exactly how he popped up and came back around. But since he's with these people, he presumably was in the Southlands previously,
Right.
right? So it almost seems to imply that something did happen that would cause him to leave. Now, it doesn't really make sense that he would just be fleeing in general. So it like makes me wonder, did he know he'd find Galadriel there? Was he trying to make his way to Numenor? I mean, I'm honestly not really sure. And I also kind of wonder how mortal he is, so to speak, in the sense of like when the big fish was, I mean, it was a very cool scene, was sort of prowling in the water. He seemed pretty intent on like, I got to get myself out of here.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of like just questions with that whole thing. I definitely am thinking about too.
Yeah. So maybe I mean surely we'd get answers on this. I would imagine at least, especially with the Gandalf storyline, if those people still chase him or whatever. But maybe they won't since they know he's not who they were looking. But yeah, very interested to know more about pre-episode one Halbrand's story. Like, was he just fleeing? Because it did seem like, and again, he could be lying or manipulating. But in that moment with Galadriel, he made it seem like I was just going to give up. Like I wasn't going to have these aspirations. And then you, the person whose sole motivation was like to stop me, are the one that got me like back on the path. So if we can trust that statement
Hmm.
from him, then
Yeah.
it seemed like, was he on that raft just like, screw it, like I'm going to go try to live life now. I don't know. I don't know. I just hope we get some clarity on, or at least backstory on what was going on.
Well, and it begs the question, where is the rest of the orc army?
Yeah.
We have Adar's forces. Where is like Sauron's entourage, I guess? And
Well,
that's presumably where he's going back to in that final scene with them. I don't know.
Or maybe like weren't they all at least presumably wiped out? Because weren't the orcs with Adar like a surprise for I can't remember his name. The the elf, the main elf that was like with the Southlanders.
Right.
Like nobody thought they were still around at all, right? And wasn't it
Right.
like, oh, they're still here? So maybe there like aren't any, and
Right.
maybe that's why he was just like resigned to his ship life on with the castaways or something. I don't know. Probably a lot more to unpack if we were a little bit more familiar with the lore and stuff, but
Let's talk about
lots of questions.
Gandalf,
Yeah.
and which I don't know how much is implied by the fact we didn't even mention the storyline in our recap. But I really liked Nori and the Harfoots, and we're saying Gandalf. Maybe it's not. I saw someone say that like in the lore, Gandalf isn't due to show up for like another like few thousand years or something. So I guess it could not be. I don't know what the Ishtar is. To me, it seems like Gandalf, but all that to say, I really like the storyline. I thought funny enough, I thought that their music, whatever track that keeps playing whenever it's them, I really enjoyed. I liked pretty much all the characters from that storyline. There were people I saw criticism like, oh, you just have to have your Hobbit people in it, and I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I really liked really all those scenes, honestly.
Yeah, I did too. And as far as the lore, I saw some of this too. And again, not well versed enough to really even explain what I'm talking about, but seemingly like it doesn't really make sense for that to be Gandalf in terms of the established lore. But it seems like that's definitely who it is, given that final line that he talked about, like, follow your nose or whatever, which is word for word the same thing Gandalf says to Frodo in the Lord of the Rings. So if it's not him, weird thing to have done.
Yeah.
But
There
so I
was
think
some
that
writer who was like, I'm gonna have him say this. I don't know where it came from though.
I'm gonna have him say for Frodo as they charge into battle.
I know it's from something. Anyway.
So I think that this is just one of the creative kind of
Yeah.
leniences they're gonna take with telling this story, because it does bring in a lot of, for lack of a better word, casual fans to be like, oh, it's Lord of the Rings show. Yeah, like Gandalf's in it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that maybe would upset some people, but I think it's cool. Kind of to see how he became what we know him to become at some point. And I also like just the narrative parallel, I guess, of being paired with, I know they're Harfoots, not hobbits yet, but being paired with the Harfoots, just like we know him to have this like special relationship with hobbits thousands of years later. Like this is probably where that blossomed, because these are the
Yeah.
first people that helped him when he arrived here. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's a nice explanation, I guess, of that relationship. It's I think it's less fan service and more like here's why in Lord of the Rings that relationship was there for
Yeah.
sure.
And I'm just excited to see, like, I've always thought that was just an interesting character, especially spoilers in Lord of the Rings, how like, Gandalf the Grey dies and Gandalf the White comes back, but he doesn't like, he's not like the same person really. Like he is,
Right.
but he's like a whole new character. And so I feel like this is kind of shedding some light on how these, I forget the actual name of like these wizards, starts with a V or something, I think, but how these entities like work. Like they are the same entity, but like they kind of enter new.
Super Saiyan.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So um I'm just interested to see if slash when he might like regain more of his faculties, and or maybe he's like new, like maybe this is the first time he's ever showed up and this is like he's a baby, for lack of a better word, but perhaps he's not, and just like those people were trying to get Sauron's memories back to him, maybe Gandalf will at some point regain his true memories, and I'll be interested just to see like
Yeah, it
what that
was a little
entails.
it was a little confusing though. He went from like saying maybe one word, like I'm good, to like after he's rescued, he's like, you should follow your nose. And I'm like, wait, what happened? Like, why are you so smart all of a sudden? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Smart's not the right word. Like aware of, it seemed like he had kind of rediscovered a part of himself. And maybe that was an implication of that whole scene. Like when he picks up the staff, it does like awaken something in him.
Mm-hmm.
But there was such a disconnect. I felt like that. I was like, bro, you couldn't even pick up an apple that's rolling down a hill, and now you're Gandalf. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I didn't expect the Nori to like travel with him at the end. I didn't
I
expect her
felt
to
like
like
she
leave
had to.
her family.
I feel like she had to, and she had a really. I don't know if we'll see any of those characters again, except for maybe her best friend, who's maybe following them in secret. But because she has no one, like I love the
Right.
detail of you find out like she's lost her whole family, they wandered off the trail or whatever. So it seems like there's a really cool like Samwise. It has to happen, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if we'll see any of the other characters, but I think what was really cool was the development of that whole group. Nobody wanders off trail, and yet the leader of the Harfoots, he and Nori's mom volunteering to go with them to help Gandalf, who was an outsider. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was really cool. That was like kind of a nice development for those characters. And it was also nice at the end with, Nori's mom kind of being like, she even said it, or Nori said it herself, I'm a Harfoot, that's all I'm ever going to be. Them being like, hey, you're going to go with them, right? Like you kind of have to. That all felt really good to me. And I guess that's why, not going back to Numenor, but like, it's why some of the writing feels so weird, because you have these some storylines that just don't really sync. And then when you look at the Harfoot story, the start, middle, and end, you just see how some of these things really came together well.
Yeah,
So
I completely agree, which is another reason why the finale and the penultimate episode and the finale kind of really gave me another surge of hope for the show, because I really liked everything you just talked about. And I could totally see us never like the show leaving the rest of the Harfoots, and that storyline is going to be Nori and Gandalf. But I hope it doesn't. Like I would love to still see what happens like with them, because like I think that's one of the most valuable assets this show has, is just like the deep lore of this world. And so show me more about what the Harfoots do. How do they become the hobbits one day? Not that we'll necessarily see that, but like I hope we haven't seen the last of them, even though Nori has left them and is doing her own thing now.
right.
I think it would be a mistake if so, but I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't, but I hope that's not the case.
I will say maybe this is an unfair criticism, but again, it being $1 billion show, I was kind of like at maybe like around episode 4 or 5, I was like, can we get Gandalf like something to wear that's not like a bunch of leaves and ropes? Like, I don't know. It just feels like the set design or costume people being like, all right, let's bring out his outfit. That's what he wears. I'm just like, I don't know. I know it's petty. I'm just like, it just feels like, I don't know. And sometimes when that happens, it just kind of gives a sense of like a staleness, I guess, to like what's actually happening. And the fact that we know they traveled a great distance to like the new orchard or whatever, and he wore the same thing the whole time. I don't know. I'm just kind of like, could we not? No one wanted to loan him something, or I mean, he's a lot bigger, but still, I don't know.
I mean, there definitely is some criticism to be had there, just with the show as a whole, in terms of, again, feeling a bit CW at times. So I mean, I'll give you that.
Gandalf soundtrack though, that was Biss. It was really good.
Quick thing, I just now realized when we were talking about it earlier, in terms of like the timeline of the show, like will there be a time jump? So we know Isildur's he's in the show and he's like a teenager right now, and we know at the fall of Sauron he's like an adult.
Right.
So that really is only like 10 years max, seemingly. I guess it could be, actually, that could be like 10 to 30 maybe, I guess.
Yeah, depending how old he is, yeah.
Which I was previously thinking like thousands, but no, like really, and not that I don't know how long of a time between like when Sauron gets his fingers chopped off, and
Right.
when like Lord of the Rings takes place, could be 30,000 years for all I know. But at the very least, we're not that far away from Sauron being defeated. Um, so yeah, I guess the story now in my mind got a lot more shrunk. There
Yeah.
still could be a
Let me.
time jump from like teenage Isildur to grown man Isildur, but
Yeah. Okay. So the. Okay. Yeah. This doesn't make sense. The period. So the second age of Middle Earth is the period of 3,400 years that begins with the defeat of Morgoth to the first defeat of Sauron.
okay, interesting. I guess
So
we really
yeah,
don't know how long it's been since the defeat of Morgoth, like in terms of
I
years.
it's probably been quite a bit of time, honestly, because it's so much time has passed that people have even begun to kind of stereotypically like forgotten who was the enemy again. Did they,
Mm,
where did they even really exist? I mean, if you set it forward that many thousands of years, it makes a lot more sense why the elves watching over the Southlanders have become kind of casual
yeah,
and also kind of paints the picture of why Galadriel's team mutinies because they're like,
right, right.
dude, let it go. Like it's been forever.
Yeah,
Um, but I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
It'll definitely be interesting to see if the show even reaches that point. Like maybe the show's not even aiming to reach that point of Sauron's defeat, but it seems like that would be the logical place to ultimately end up. It'll
Hmm.
be interesting to see like the characterization of Isildur from now to the then, because we know he ultimately doesn't cast the ring in the fire, which is
Right.
what sets off the whole events of Lord of the Rings. So like, will we empathize with that decision, or will it be kind of like a heel, like a dark turn? Like is he going to be just a pure like maniacal, like I want the power for myself type of decision, which is kind of how it's been played off in terms of Lord of the Rings, but they have the opportunity now to kind of humanize him and maybe like what I'm saying? Like maybe they make that an interesting choice instead of just a
Yeah.
oh, I want the power for myself.
Yeah. I will say that I feel bad for the writers because hindsight kind of cheapens the story a little bit. Like what we're talking about with Isildur, like it made me even think about like him dying, and Elendil thinks his son is dead. And even like how kind of vague and cheesy, like the ceiling caving in. And then like, if you don't know Isildur is Isildur, um, as the writer, you can make that so much more punchy now. Like his horse being released into the wild, now it can symbolize like letting go of the loss of his son. But we're like, oh yeah, there goes his horse. He's gonna go get Isildur now. It's just like it's too bad because since we know how the story ends, it kind of makes the stakes not really as punchy, I guess.
I think that's fair, but I think it's also like you can definitely still tell an interesting and
Sure.
story even with that being the case. I don't think they're doing. We've already kind of talked about our criticisms of the writing and stuff. Obviously, they could be doing a better job, but I do wonder, like, with how big this show was in terms of budget and stuff. I gotta assume, at least their hope is that it becomes a pretty mainstream thing. So I wonder the casual, average viewer of this show if they even know that. Like, do they even know who Isildur is?
That's fair.
Um,
No,
I don't
yeah, that's
know.
fair.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I maybe I
Yeah.
should ask my girlfriend if she. I'm sure she actually doesn't have any idea who he is, but
Yeah,
I'm
do you
curious,
know who
kind of
that
like
is?
the generic where the audience falls
She's like,
on
no,
the
let me go
spectrum.
back to sleep. It's 2 a.m. Okay, well, I know we've been going for a little bit. Is there any other like specific story points that you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. We hit pretty much the main things I wanted to talk about. Just in terms of wrapping it back up to a point here. What Let me ask you, I guess, a two pronged question. What do you think was the strongest part of this show? And what's your final? Grade if you want to give it a grade, or if you want to just be super binary, worth watching, not worth watching.
Yeah, I would say a generic answer. The high point would be episodes 6, 7, and 8, because there was no Numenor, and I don't know. That's was it the 6th or the 7th episode where the Mordor Mount Doom erupts. Like that was just a fantastic final 5 to 10 minutes of an episode. I
Yeah.
mean, it was really crazy and good. So I think, and also like that back half got back into sort of what the original trilogy is known for, which is like very much practical effects. And it wasn't as, I mean, I'm saying it wasn't as CGI heavy when there's like this plume of, lava of smoke coming at you. But it just wasn't like, compare it to the start of the episode of the season when Galadriel like jumps off someone's sword who like launches her up on the troll, or like maybe like episode 2 or 3 when the elves who are imprisoned by the orcs are like throwing the chains and like, twisting. That stuff was very superhero-y to me, and it's just not what I enjoy. The back half felt a lot more grounded. As amazing as these warriors are, it just felt a lot more palatable, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it felt like the show found its footing a lot better towards the end. And those were definitely like the high points for me. Like I went from like kind of like I'm watching this show hoping it's going to be good to okay, I'm excited for next week. This is really good.
Yeah.
So, and before I answer the second question, I'll ask that first one back to you. Your high point for the show.
High point for the show, I would definitely in I'll answer it in two kind of ways. I will agree with you that the second half, I feel like it really started finding its zone, if you will, and I feel like I was like, okay, this is set up. I really like where we're headed with like Sauron headed into Mount Doom. So I really felt like those last two episodes, especially, were it really starting to sing. So I'd say that was the high point, like of the season in terms of episodes. But the high point of like the show for me, I think honestly was just like the beautiful set pieces and the cinematography, for lack of a better word, in some scenes. We already talked earlier about how some of it, left a lot to be desired, but the parts that they hit well. Like I thought, like yeah, I'm in Lord of the Rings right now. Like these are the beautiful like landscapes of Middle Earth that Peter Jackson first introduced to me. I thought that they did that really well when they were, at least, I'm not going to retread, but so those were probably the high points for me. And I'm not like, I don't want to be disappointed in season 2, but I do now have like, okay, I see where this could be good, and so I'm excited for season 2. Maybe a little too much, maybe, given what the lows we kind of hit sometimes in season 1.
I think I have to see more of where the budget's being spent. Like the fact that it's $1 billion show, there were definitely episodes where I was like, why did this cost so much? Like, and I just didn't get it. And I could see it a lot more in the second half, but definitely the first half, I was thinking, well, how did they spend $1 billion on this? Because we already talked about that CW show, but overall, I would give season 1 a solid B. I think. Ooh. Maybe a B plus.
Okay.
Ended on a high note. A lot of weak episodes in Numenor. And I'd say maybe a B plus. If I was maybe coming off the high of the finale, I maybe would have given it an A minus.
Oh.
But probably I'd say a B, maybe a B plus.
Okay.
Which now I'm thinking I have to be like, it's like a 7. I don't know. What about you?
See, I was, maybe I'm being a little harsh, but I was thinking C plus B minus is the range I'm kind of in.
If I hadn't watched the last 3 episodes, I'd be in the solid C territory. But I really liked how everything ended, and I'm hopeful, and so I put it in the B range.
Yeah. I would say I'm probably, if I gave 2 answers there, I'd say I'd probably, because of the finale, in the B minus range, but I was definitely like C plus range for the whole middle of the show. But then kind of the nice little skirt at the end.
Yeah.
Um,
So we'd put it, for you guys listening, we'd put it in the C to B maybe range, it sounds like.
yeah. And should you watch it? Not that, I mean, anybody that made it this far that hasn't seen it, I guess is probably 0%. But I would say if you're a fan of fantasy stuff and this is your normal like genre that you enjoy, then yeah, for sure watch it. But if you're not really a typical fantasy person, I would say you could probably skip it at least for now. Like maybe we'll check back in a couple seasons if it really picks up. But you're gonna find this content at least for now better elsewhere. We don't talk about the end of Game of Thrones, but like I don't think this even comes anywhere near like how good season 1 of Game of Thrones was or the early seasons. But so if you're a fantasy fan, check it out. If not, you could probably wait and we'll see where this goes.
I'd say even if you enjoyed the Lord of the Rings movie, maybe you're not a huge fantasy person, but you like Lord of the Rings, you might enjoy it. So,
Fair.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that's it.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for checking us out. If I'm actually curious if this is your first, if you're on this video and this is your first you've ever listened to us, I would love to hear about that in the comments. Because sure most of the people are coming from our other content. But appreciate you sticking around if you did. And got, I guess Critical Role is probably the next thing we got coming up
next week. Yep. Okay.
But other than that, we just need a thumbnail.
Yeah. I think I'm going to do like
I was thinking maybe like because we're talking about is it good or not. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. That works. All right. Well, don't forget, guys, you can follow us on Twitter. We don't pay the blue check mark fee, but we're still on there. We're at the Pixelists. Here on our YouTube channel, the Pixelist YT. And
correction there now, because not to get in the weeds here, but YouTube introduced new YouTube handles, which that I think is now our URL, which it is just at Pixelists. The Pixelist was taken, but yeah. So I think if you just type in /Pixelists, it'll get you to us now.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you later.
Bye.
See ya.